Welcome to the QP Diaries podcast. This podcast is all about inspiring and empowering the next generation of QP professionals and future quality assurance leaders in the UK pharmaceutical industry. On every episode, I'll be speaking to QPs from across the industry, and our listeners will have the opportunity to hear their stories, their expertise, and we are going to be discussing topics to foster growth and learning to help you develop your career as a qualified person. If you're passionate about quality assurance and want to learn from some of the very best QPs and thought leaders from across the industry, then this is a podcast for you. I'm your host, Dal, founder of AssureBio, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. We are proud to have partnered with NSF as a sponsor of the QP Diaries podcast. Becoming a qualified person is a significant commitment of time, effort and resources, and the QPs trained by NSF are widely recognised as the very best in the industry, with no other training provider matching their experience or success rate. If you're interested in learning more about NSF's QP training course, you can find the link in the show notes. For now, we hope you enjoy this episode of the QP Diaries podcast. Vicky, welcome to the QP Diaries podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. I am very well, thank you, Dal. The sun is out. I've got a beautiful view over my garden, so yes, all is good with the world.
Perfect, yeah, perfect scenario then for to record the podcast today. So no, thanks for being a guest. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to our conversation. You've got a very impressive career as a quality leader in QP, and with some interesting experiences along the way, which we'll get into today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, if you're okay, let's dive right into it. And let's start from the very, very start, really. And I think do you want to share your journey to becoming a QP?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their own unique stories, don't they? And I think, there's quite often some commonalities between them. And I think, I very much started in the traditional role of a chemistry graduate, having really, really loved the practical side of my degree. The idea of having a desk job at 21 was fairly hideous to me. So I was lucky enough to actually get a job based on the bench at 3M Healthcare, as was in Loughborough back in 1997. So yes, I absolutely loved that job. It was hands-on. I was working with metered dose inhalers, so MDIs predominantly, which means, I got to play with liquid nitrogen and pipe cutters and, strip HPLC pumps and all of that good stuff. And the product that I was working on was actually in the R&D laboratory. So I also sort of got an initial introduction to the likes of, well, actually, we're supporting clinical trials. It's going through phase 2, it was going into phase 3. And similarly working alongside the guys in the production areas as we were going through production scale up, being online and taking the samples, cleaning validation, that side of things, as well as you can imagine, a huge amount of analytical method validation throughout the course of that project as it went ongoing. But, so when I joined the site, I really did think, brilliant, I've got a job for life here, because there were lots of people that have had their entire careers. It was, and it is still there. It's a big facility. It's a commercial facility, well established, doesn't just do MDIs, does lots of other products. And I had one of those unicorn things of a final salary pension as well, which was just absolutely, I thought, right, this is it. I'm set for life. But what I didn't know about myself is that I like change. And I like new challenges. So after a sort of 2.5 years, I started thinking, actually, something a little bit different would be quite nice. So I started looking around, and it actually took me about 18 months before I then did change jobs and ended up changing companies. So I went from 3M Healthcare to, they were called Pharmaceutical Profiles at the time. Okay, so I went from 3M Healthcare to Pharmaceutical Profiles, as they were known at the time. They're now sort of Quotient Clinical, Quotient Sciences. But back in sort of early 2001, when I joined them, they were very much, at the point of having 1 or 2 facilities in Nottingham. And it was very hands-on. You got exposed to everything. So although I joined as a research scientist, principal development scientist, I was based within the laboratories, but also in the manufacturing areas as well. You were working alongside the project managers, the principal investigators, so screening, volunteer recruitment and screening was happening within the same facility. We had the wards where the studies were actually being dosed, the samples being taken, etc., etc. So you got a big exposure, but also it was a chance for me to work with some different products as well. So although they were doing a lot of MDIs and dry powder inhalers with utilizing a radio label from a traceability perspective, I actually joined to support the gastrointestinal studies. So working with non-sterile liquids and powders in sort of a specific type of capsule that they had that could, with a tracer, could be activated in different parts of the gastrointestinal tract so that they can then take blood and get an idea of where, basically where the best dose was for targeting that in latter stages. So yeah, as I said, it was not just dealing with the sort of the tech transfer and the method development within the laboratories, but it was also developing the manufacturing methods within the clean room as well. So actually doing that hands-on side of things. During my time there, they did recognize the fact that actually the people that were essentially doing the release testing needed to be separate from the people that were doing the manufacturing. And that did happen over the course of my time there. But also, as you can sort of, as I said, it was start of 2001 and I was there until sort of 2003. This was pre-clinical trials directive being implemented. And so towards my latter part of my time there, I was working for Michelle Yeomans, as she became. And she was obviously horizon scanning, being aware that there was going to be a need for QPs to go onto the license when the clinical trials directive came into effect in May 2004. And it actually sort of, one of my one-to-ones said, have you ever thought about being a QP, Vicky? Yeah. And I was sort of aware of them from 3M because I'd kind of been to meet one of them with some release data at some point, but didn't really properly understand it. So kind of went away and did a bit of research and thought, oh, that sounds interesting. You get to get involved with all of these different things. So so that really piqued my interest. And I suppose it was kind of serendipitous that my feet were itching a little bit again, and how I happened to see a job being advertised with Novartis Consumer Health that offered full QP training as well with it. So I applied for that. It was a QA coordinator's role. So that was my first sort of proper move into a QA role. So started there in March 2003. And then I didn't waste much time. May 2003, I went on my first DBA NSF QP training course. Okay. And that was, so I really kind of, I suppose, grew up in my QA role at my years at Novartis. I was lucky enough to start QP training with another colleague. So we really went through it together. We also had, other people within the organization that had been through training. So were able to give us some help and support. But, so alongside the training, because at that point, at those days, it was only a case of doing it over 2 years. There was no other option, and that was fine because it allowed me to really kind of get used to the routine QA kind of role, to be honest. And it was the very typical things: documentation control, internal audits, complaints, technical agreements, deviations, change controls, as well as doing the preliminary QA batch document review before it would then go to the QP. So yes, and I started off as just a coordinator and then did end up sort of in a supervisory team leader sort of role along the way. And then things should have been fairly smooth sailing, but as life quite often happens, didn't quite manage to do my full 2 years of training. I should have done my last course in I think March 2005. However, I had my daughter Maya in January 2005, so I did finish a little bit short. But I took my maternity leave off. And the only thing that I did do was I went back to work in September 2005, having drafted my QP application form, to be honest. Okay. So that's the one thing. So I came back in roaring to go. Yeah. I have a very good and highly qualified sponsor who was, held me to a much higher standard than I was perhaps wanting to be held to, but I'm latterly very glad that they did. So yes, I then just had to kind of get back into it. So I was working full time with a baby,
Yeah.
hope, and a husband and maybe some friends, and
Yeah.
it was very full on because it was just, the day job needed to be done, as well as identifying the gaps in experience or knowledge or time on site that needed to be filled to actually get me to that point of being a credible QP candidate. So yeah, it was, pretty much from the get-go, as I said, very my colleague that was going through the QP training with us, I think it was good because I think if I had energy and she didn't, I could drag her along, and vice versa. She had a lot of energy that could drag me along if I wasn't particularly feeling, motivated. So we did, lunchtime learning sessions, and really from 2005, we were regularly doing practice VIVA sessions, but
Okay.
practice scenario questions. And I've heard it, having listened to a few other podcasts, and it's the same thread that everyone says is you cannot practice scenario questions enough, because oh my goodness, how weird it feels when you first start actually having to articulate out your thought processes. And if you have got a bit of a crazy mind that's all over the place, trying to calm that and explain
Yeah.
yourself rationally, it's so odd. um, but the fact is, by the time you are getting to VIVA, you need to be over that oddness, so that you are then just focusing on the issue and how you can explain, and how you would approach the problem solving. So yeah, that, I think, what, kind of was something that we just chipped away at. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just something that we did together. We also, we would do mock Vivas between, with my sponsor, with our boss. Um, and it even started slowly from a case of, right, we're going to ask these two questions, go away and research them, building all the way up to sitting down and doing almost like a full mock Viva without any pre-reads. And that obviously was something that developed over a couple of years. Um, Working for an organisation like Novartis, so the site I was based on was a mature facility. It had been established in the mid-70s. Liquids, creams and ointments, manufacturing and packaging, as well as doing sort of packaging of patches and gums, so smoking cessation products. And we did that for Europe. So some interesting products, but not everything. But again, large organisation like Novartis, we're able to tap on into our networks, so that we were able to go and visit an API facility up in Grimsby, to go and see aseptic and terminal sterilisation manufacturing up at the Animal Health facility in Dundee, and go and spend some time with the clinical trial IMP QPs down in Horsham, as was at the time. So that was really useful, as well as getting some other site visits from our QP network of people that we had got to know through our training. But also it was very useful for us, because we hosted people on our site as well, because there
Yeah.
were people in our network that would just be dealing with quite niche or sterile products, and the idea of a non-sterile facility and what that could potentially look like, or the challenges of large scale packaging. So and there's nothing greater than trying, if you want to understand something, you've got to try and change it or try and show people around, and nothing like someone going, what does that do? Going, right, I definitely need to know that. So yeah, I mean, both ways it was extremely valuable, and very lucky to go through it. So yeah, I think after about a year, I had the sort of the make or break mock Viva with my sponsor, my boss, and I was given thumbs up, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Application form went in, and then I waited. I waited and then found out I was having another baby. So that's just to make things nice and straightforward. And also along the time, it was also around this time actually that I lost my dad as well, rather suddenly. So there was kind of like quite a lot of emotional stuff going along in the background. And it kind of got to early December, and I hadn't heard anything back from the RSC about my application. So I didn't want to, so I actually rang up and spoke to the QP officer at the time and sort of said, I'm not trying to be pushy. I am expecting a baby in May. Do you have any idea of whether I'm likely to get a date before that or not? And she was lovely and said that, only had feedback from one so far, but it was fine. But let's pencil in a date for, I think it was around mid-April time. So I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll be absolutely enormous, but I can do this. But also at that point, you think, right, I can't keep going with all of this, because by this point I was studying in the evenings. So as I say, working full time, getting home, having a bit of time with my daughter, getting her to bed, and then really pretty much, that was, from 7 o'clock onwards. Bye, husband, I'm going upstairs to study now. And I realised I couldn't carry on doing that through all the way through to April, so I stopped and gave myself some time off. I did also say if there was any chance of any cancellations coming through to contact me at that point. And I think it was just before the Christmas in 2006, I did get a phone call for the offering me the date of the 20th of February. So I kind of quickly went home, did a study, sort of a study guide. Could I get through this? A study plan. Went back the next day and went yes. So, and it started from the 1st of January 2007, and literally on the 1st of January I was up in my office. Everyone else is still relaxing. Obviously I wasn't because I was pregnant, but and I literally worked through it. So yeah, I suppose organised. I am not a last minute crammer. You learn about yourself as you go through QP training and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I am not a last minute person. I'm a chipper awayer. So yeah, and my study plan for all the way from the 1st of January all the, to the 20th of Feb included downtime as well. So I had days off. It wasn't I was studying every day. So yes, I made sure that I stuck to it because it was realistic. And I think we were then ramping up to weekly mock vivas. I've got, so I've actually still got this here. So this is what I got. So this is what I got my QP. So that's my QP training.
Okay.
That is all of it. And as you can see, I was a mind mapper. So so it was repetition. I kind of went through my notes and condensed, and using the mind mapping works for me with that. I do have a pictorial memory. So the colours and the locations really did help me pull out and remember certain key facts that you want to retain. But we also had a nice tranche. I think we had a nice thick wodge of past VIVA questions, and I just went through them endlessly. I went through them with my colleague that I was going through training with. I went through them with my husband. I talked to the wall in my office, and again, it's just don't you've got to get used to talking them through, and all the way through. So my organisation were always fantastic around prep for QP exams as they were at the time. So I went on study leave 2 weeks before my Viva. And again, I think I went into the office a couple of times, did a mock Viva. I went up to York and had my mock Viva with, I think it was Peter Goff and Martin Lush, which was terrifying in 3 hours. But, the fact that I can remember people going, how do you think that went, Vicky? I went, well, I didn't do great on that question, and I didn't do great on that question. And he very gently and he very kindly sort of said, well, you don't have to get 100%, Vicky. You did really well. You definitely passed. And I was like, oh. Then it was kind of like this idea that you have to be omnipotent as a QP. You have to know everything and be everywhere. And it's a case of actually being aware of what you don't know is also a great strength. So I think, and I've said, people that have done training courses with me, or people that I've been a tutor or a coach for, have heard me say this. When you get to the point of going to your Viva, you need to think, I can pass and I deserve to pass. Doesn't mean that something might go a bit curvebally on the day, but you need to go in thinking that you are there and you are, a credible candidate, because obviously on paper you look to be, and they want, they want good QPs. So yes, that was, me ready. Off I go to London the day before. Made sure that my hotel was around the corner, knew where I was going, tried to get some sleep. Bit challenging, but I did manage it. I think I was the second one on the day. Sorry, this is the huge. Sorry, if there's too much detail, please trim this down. But yeah, second one of the day, go in there. The lady before me had just come out, and we sat next to each other and stoically ignored each other whilst we waited and waited and waited. And you kind of think, the longer they're in there, that's not good. And she goes. She's eventually called back in. And she comes back out. She's very happy. Obviously, they have passed her. And then she was chatting to me, and she was brilliant. She goes, "They're really lovely. They are going to try and relax you. They recognise that you're going to be nervous." She goes, "I made a complete hash of one of my questions, and I actually stopped myself and said, 'Can I start that again, please? That isn't where I want to go.'" And I actually, think that that person having the confidence to say, no, sorry, I'm not right here, can I start again, was again part, demonstrated some of those other attributes that they talk about from a QP perspective, the knowing what you don't know, being able to say, actually, sorry, I'm wrong. So yeah, that was, kind of as best a start for me going in as it could be. Went in, it happened, an hour and a quarter, I think, went like that. Out to go. Not surprisingly, I was 6 months pregnant at this point. Off you go to the ladies. You come back and, the QP officer is waiting to take me back in, and you think, well, either that means it's good or it's very, very bad. But yes, I was given the thumbs up. I was told, congratulations, that was really good. Enjoy being a QP. And off I went, and it was all a bit kind of surreal, to be honest. So yes, and that was my journey to being a QP. I remember ringing my husband, my mum. I remember ringing the office and the great cheers behind, that I could hear in the background when I saw that I passed. So yeah, it is a huge feeling, but it's kind of odd because it's been, for me, it was almost 4 years of my life up to there. And obviously, as I said, huge amount of personal change, trying to juggle family commitments and changes and grief, and as well as the full-time job and young children and a huge amount of study. But yeah, it is. Yeah, I still had to. It wasn't really until I had the letter the next day I thought, yeah, they definitely said yes.
So was it
So,
a bit of a pinch yourself sort of moment when you
definitely, because as you say, you've seen some of your colleagues or fellow trainee QPs going through, and you think, oh wow, brilliant! I'm so pleased for them. I'm so pleased for them. But I am, I think you do have that, as I say, that element of self-doubt sometimes. Even though I knew there was almost two sides of me, I can do this and I deserve to do this. But you do still kind of like, you still have that negative voice can be like, yeah, but it's not, no, that's not for you. That's not for you. So yeah, it was a real sense of achievement. And also I think it was a bit of adjusting back to not having to study in the evenings was quite an interesting one. Yeah, my husband was like, "Oh, you're back, are you?" So,
a bit of freedom? Yeah, I can imagine.
yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
From start to finish, and really. So as you say, it was a 4-year period from when you started your training to the very end, and obviously a lot of personal changes in that time period. So you went through quite a challenging process to become a QP, and a lot of
Yeah,
dedication, as you say, a lot of hours spent just locked up in a room, sort of training yourself. So yeah,
yeah,
that's off in terms of dedication during that time period. We're taking a moment to share a message from Catherine Kay, who is the Executive Director at our sponsor NSF, where she highlights the benefits of their training programme for trainee QPs.
Our trainers for our courses are experts. They're experts from industry, have had many years' experience and bring a wealth of knowledge to our training courses. We also provide VIVA preparation sessions for them every month where they can practice answering questions in a group scenario. NSF have a long-standing partnership with the University of Strathclyde, so not only do our courses meet the requirements of the QP study guide, but they're also taught at a master's level. So that means that people can go on to and acquire a postgraduate certificate, diploma or even master's with the University of Strathclyde. Then you can go to our webpage, so nsf.org, and we have a whole page there set to our qualified person training, so you can read more there.
I do think that you can't. I don't think you have to kind of have a. You have to really enjoy being a QP, wanting to be a QP for that to drive you forward. Because as you say, it's a vast amount of work to get there. But it's also the fact that for me, I find that it's actually very much aligned with kind of like my core principles about, it's based on common sense and doing the right thing even when someone's not looking, and the why. I used to drive my mum insane as a small child. Why? But for me, I think that's really important when you are asking, individuals to work in a certain way consistently, routinely, be it 2 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. It's the why. It's, don't just do what I say. I'm asking you to do this for a reason. And, and I think the more I went through it, the more I kind of got the importance of that and the values that QPs can really bring to organizations about that, the influence in culture and education, and kind of, hopefully being a positive, a positive force of good ripples of information and good feelings and knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now bringing it down, bringing it forward over a number of years then. So your roles obviously evolved once you became a QP. So you went from also full-time employment into becoming an independent consultant.
Yep.
But in that period, what key milestones have really shaped your career to where you are now?
Okay, so yes, I suppose a couple of things spring to mind. So I've been through. So actually, when I returned to work at Novartis in January 2008, the site had announced that it was closing. So we had about a year to work through tech transfers, technical agreements, on-site audits, all of that stuff, as well as managing, personal feelings of, my goodness, what now? Young family, big mortgage, all of that stuff. But being up, managing my own feelings as well as trying to keep everyone on point. So yeah, certainly, there was it was an interesting, in reflection, it was frankly terrifying until I had another job secured at the time. But certainly on reflection, it was very interesting going through aggressive technical transfers, multiple quality agreements, doing lots of different site visits and audits, actually maintaining the day-to-day business, business as usual, maintaining standards. I think, certainly I can remember going to visit, spending some time with the night shift because, making sure, because they didn't have QA support in the evenings, just trying to keep everybody focused. But yes, so that was actually my first site closure that I went to. I've been through one other and a future, another site that I went to that was meant to be closing. My second site closure happened after, as I say, quite an unusual event. So I started at Catalent in November 2010. So well-established old Astra facility, medicated oral solid dose packaging. On the license, it was me, one of the QP, and we had a locum that came in periodically. And yes, I can't remember the exact date in March, but it was a Thursday. I know that. The reviewing officers that were based in the factory and had a little window into our QP office, opened it and just went, "Get out! There's a fire in the warehouse. We're not joking."
Oh no. Okay.
So yes, so we all trooped out into the car park. Latterly, the alarms did go off, but they had been isolated because there was hot work going on. There was welding going on. We were converting a section of the warehouse into a large controlled drugstore for a new project that was coming in, and unfortunately, some of the welding caught some of the wall insulation and went up. So yes, we, as I say, the entire workforce was out in the car park, and we watched. Oh look, there's smoke coming from that roof. Smoke's getting darker. Oh gosh, there's flames now. So that was an interesting Thursday at work. We all had to, sort of troops off to a nearby hotel, which they did have, from a disaster recovery. I think Friday I was at home, and then Monday morning we were back in the hotel in Corby, trying to actually work out what we're doing from a business recovery perspective. Fire actually burnt for about a month. I mean, the details of how long it actually burnt is gone, but it was actually in the core of the facility. So the firewalls had done what it should have done and retained the fire within it, but it was so hot that a lot of the structural walls had been damaged. Of course, there'd been a lot of fire water that firefighting water had gone on, which had obviously dripped through the facility. And we were then at the point of, okay, so initial investigation suggests that the equipment within, the packaging equipment within production it's just water and smoke damaged. It doesn't appear to have been damaged by the fire. We've obviously got a huge amount of business that's associated with the facility. How are we going to actually get this, business up and running quite quickly? So I'm just trying to think, looking back on it. So I think I was a junior QP. I was only about 34, 35 at this point. So, I was essentially the junior QP, but I was at the table with the site quality director. The site quality directors flew in from the States, came up from Swindon, came over from Germany. There was a huge round table meeting that was happening that week, along with regional leads. The global quality lead came in as well, and it was a case of, right, okay, how are we going to develop? How are we going to do this? The concept was the equipment looks to be largely okay. So if we can then, so we've got the equipment, we've got the people, we've got the processes. Where can we place this? Where can we put them into facilities? So the three nearest facilities were down in Swindon, up in Bolton, and over in Germany in Schorndorf. So this concept of okay, so if we can get the equipment in, how are we going to manage it from a QMS perspective, from a PQS perspective? So obviously we're working in different facilities, but it's going to be our equipment, our people, our processes. So the concept of this sort of factory within a factory approach was developed quite quickly, with the understanding of what would be almost essentially lift and shift Corby facilities, and where we would need to interface with the local sites facilities, sort of maintenance, pest control, that sort of stuff. And within, I think it was probably about 2 weeks after the fire, we had a couple of MHRA inspectorate representatives come and meet with us, as I say, this big round table, and presented this concept of, this is how we're going to do it, this is how we're going to approach it, and essentially got the green light for it. So that was kind of the first hurdle. Then it's a case of, okay, how do we actually decontaminate smoke and fire damage, water damaged equipment? Because there isn't ICH guidance on that. But we've been through the insurance company, we'd been given contacts with some really good, I suppose, people that are used to dealing with fire damage recovery, be it whatever industrial scale. So yes, I actually headed up the cleaning and recovery side of things. I remember going to visit their facility, so I could actually see what do they mean by cleaning. And I went with another lady, one of our very experienced production operatives, one of those operatives that you would love to clone. She was absolutely amazing, and I remember both of us spending about 2 hours cleaning just the checkweigher of this line, and we were like, yeah, it's really, really clean. And the supervisor came over, and it was like the white glove test, and no, it wasn't remotely clean at all. But that element of when there isn't a standard to go by, the common sense approach. Okay, so what can we do to actually have because this is non-sterile products. We are talking about a non-sterile, secondary packaging, primary and secondary packaging facility lines. What do you normally do when you've got new equipment coming in, or if you're transferring from one site to another site? It's you have to think laterally and sensibly about what standards you can approach. Being able to talk to the MHRA inspectors when I was presenting this is, how we've been doing the cleaning, to be able to say and relay the story of, I've been to the area, I've watched how they've done it, I've had a go at it, and they're far better at it than I am. As well as then saying, actually, they're also through the insurance company, we've got subcontracted laboratories coming in, and they're going to do swabbing, be it microbial and chemical recovery tests to make sure that it's of an equivalent cleanliness that you would expect for a non-sterile oral solid dose piece of equipment coming in. And essentially it was just, kind of done line by line, piece by piece, and each one had to be signed off by the cleaning organisation. Once it had been signed off by the cleaning organisation, they would trigger the swabbing to come in. Once the swabbing was done and is available, that would then come to us. And once, if we were happy with it, it would then be shipped to whichever receiving site it was at. Our engineers would reassemble it. We were lucky enough to have some already established production areas in most of the facilities, so it wasn't a case of having to, that it was already established standards, already established grade D areas, and it was just, installing, getting them validated, and being able to sort of to get product going through there. So yeah, I mean that. It was very challenging and interesting, and I suppose we were lucky enough to have a non-licensed product that we were performing secondary packaging for on site at the time. So that was kind of our guinea pig, because that was the easiest one. We didn't need to wait for licenses to be approved. We could just manage that. So we were able, I think within about 4 weeks, the line had been decontaminated, transported, installed, validated, and was producing the first commercial batches.
Yeah.
And on the back of that, we had, MHRA. I think we had a couple of on-site visits just to sort of to see what the facility was looking like, see what the equipment was looking like of the initial lines, and then sort of walk through. This is where we're going to, manage from our licensed lines as well. And really kind of the inspectorate were phenomenally helpful and supportive, because again, they a typical situation to be in for them as well. So yes, so that's kind of the technical side of things, but not aside from that, you've got a workforce that is displaced. They are being asked to work away from home, being asked to work away from their families, having to do 24/7, the 24/7 shift pattern whilst sleeping in hotels. So I think the company did a huge, did try and support people very well. Down to, the first hotel we were based in Swindon didn't have a lot available. There wasn't a gym, there wasn't a lot of places to eat nearby. So they moved us. They moved us so that we had, a bowling alley opposite, and there was a gym on site, and a few different restaurants, and a cinema. It's just things like that, and everyone had an allowance per diem, so they didn't have to worry about racking up expenses. But also the shift rotation, so that people weren't away from home every single week. They got weeks back at home as well. So and there was regular sort of on site. They always made sure that there was management on site as well. So yeah, it was and they did, I have to say, it is a fantastic example in teamwork, because the staff were so proud of what they were able to achieve, how everyone pulled together, how all of our, all of the MHRA visits went extremely well. We were able to, anything that they were asked to, see from a validation perspective, we were able to show that we were not cutting corners. We were absolutely, sticking to the standards and maintaining the standards, as well as being able to meet our customer requirements as well. So yeah, that's quite a defining moment, and it was really, and I think really honed that it's based on common sense. And the fact that going through your career, you will, you can do as many scenarios as you like, but you'll never cover all of them that you'll come across in your career.
Yeah, that leads me nicely onto my next question, because that is a fairly unique situation that you were a part of. And as you say, as a QP, still fairly junior, you were sitting in a round table and you were having all these detailed conversations. But you mentioned sort of common sense and teamwork. But in light of the learnings from that, then what qualities or skills do you believe would be essential for someone wanting to excel as a QP?
Yeah. So I think, communication is a word that's bandied around very, often, but, how to do it well is, is probably the real kind of where the benefit of that really comes into it. And I think that nothing really kind of replaces face-to-face from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're obviously doing this virtually, and I deliver an awful lot of training since the pandemic virtually. But even virtually, you have you can see me waving my arms around, you can see my facial expressions, you can hear my tone of voice, and that is influences quite a lot with how communication is received. And I am still a big one, of just going and having a walk around, going to talk to people. I find factories and manufacturing areas hugely interesting, really fascinating. There's something very cathartic about a packaging machine, erecting the carton, putting the leaflet in, watching the pharma codes going, making sure it's going over the check wire. And when people are used to you just having walking around and being interested in them and what they're doing, you get it's all good collaborative relationships, really, to be honest. And then you will get people coming and asking you questions. If I was, I wanted to ask you this, or what about this, or we've been doing it this way, but we think it could be better that way. So I can't really, emphasize enough the benefits of getting to, getting out and talking to people. Really, to be honest. Whenever you can. I appreciate that you can work in virtual companies where it can be extremely challenging, but we can travel these days. So do try and get over to facilities, or just have monthly catch-up meetings, and don't do it through email. Do it like this, so at least you've got an idea of what the person looks like, what their voice sounds like, so that you can build those good relationships and know who to go and ask the questions to as well. So I think that's a really good, a good quality. But also, I think knowing, having the confidence to say I don't know, or the confidence to say actually I think I'm wrong, is also quite a good one. It builds, it gives you credibility, because you aren't omnipotent as a QP. People do seem to think that you're given this omnipotence chip when you qualify, but you're not. And I think that that's really an important value. But also that, and building on what I was talking about before about building the relationship, so that people can come and debate with you and challenge you as well. Because I'm very open about the fact that I quite often, if I'm presented with an issue or an event, I try and be as conservative as possible with my initial response, because I like to think, right, worst case scenario, we're over here. And then it's a case of, right, how can we come back from this when, from a scoping perspective? Because it's far better to go, right, actually, I think we've got 897 batches that are being impacted, than, going, oh, actually, I think it's only 25. And then a month later going, actually, no, sorry, it's 50. And a month later it's going, it's far, far better to start off, worst case scenario, we're here, and let's, work our way back from it. And I really, being able to do that, I need good subject matter experts, good engineers, good, development scientists, good other QA professionals. I certainly, even now, it is having that QP network of sense checking. I think this, and laying out, and it goes back to the skills that you've developed for your VIVA. Being able to articulate your thought processes becomes even more valuable when you're actually doing the job, because if you are sense checking something with a colleague of yours, the red face test or the squirm test, could you sit with your health authority inspector and explain and justify your decision making process and your thought making process without feeling uncomfortable that you've done something that you shouldn't have done? So that's always a really useful, add-on from the communication, and having that sense of what you don't know, or being aware of going, actually, sorry, I've done something wrong. Because when other people see you doing that, they're going to be less afraid of going, I'm not sure if I know this, or actually I need a bit of help, or I think I might have done something wrong. Because it's far better for people to speak up when something might not be right, because it's far easier to deal with an event when it's happened, rather than when nobody says anything and it's discovered, weeks, months later, and you can't do any kind of root cause analysis behind those sorts of things, because everyone's shut down and no one's going to give you the information. So, yeah. Does that answer it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it goes back to what you mentioned from day one of your training, and you had your colleague who was going through the same journey as yourself, but then you also used each other, plus other people as like sponsors or in your network to support you through the journey through your training. And as you say, talk about current day, that you've got to use the people around you, that you've got to collaborate, it's teamwork, as you say. That's obviously very credible in terms of the quality you need to become a very good QP. And bringing it to sort of current day, as you mentioned, you obviously do a lot of training for QPs. So what excites you most about the future of the role and the QPs that you see coming through right now, or the trainee QPs you see coming through?
Yeah, there is. I was going to say, I think I'm glad that the whole Brexit thing is now settling, so that we can actually focus on some of the value adding. As a technophobe, I know that machine learning and AI is very much coming to the forefront, and I'm in awe of it. I am, but as I say, as a technophobe, I'm not sure how much I'm going to get from it because I'd probably break it. But I do think that I suppose it's the way, you know, we have it drummed into us about the importance of risk-based thinking, and applying our efforts where it's of greatest benefit to our organisations. So I think that I'm hoping that with AI and machine learning, that we can take away the more mundane tasks that at the moment can only be done by humans, so that and fallible humans that sometimes miss stuff, as I say, especially with repetitive tasks, so that we can actually trust that to something that's more reliable, so that we can focus on the elements of the grey areas, the bits that AI can't deal with. It's either 1 or 0 with AI, but there's an awful amount of grey, and that's where we need the human element to be focusing on. So yes, I'm really hoping that will continue to hone and be implemented within our organisations, and not only just for our organisations as a whole, but I think also for QPs as well, because the list of what our responsibilities are keep on getting longer. And us being able to delegate those delegatable tasks to entrusted software service providers. So for example, if you have a fully validated electronic batch record system, that that it will then come to you and you will can review by exception. That makes the whole review process an awful lot slicker, a lot quicker, so that you can spend less of your time sat at a desk certifying batches and more time out with your colleagues and driving horizon scanning, looking for those continuous improvements.
Yeah, so do you see technology then being the real influence then on the role?
I hope so. But again, I think it could be a challenge around, because it's moving so quickly. I think potentially moving more quickly than our regulations can move. So there may be a bit of a lag, but yes, there's certainly no stopping it, is there?
Yeah. Absolutely not. No, I mean, we've got to work with it. I mean, as you say, it's accelerating at such a pace that we struggle to keep up. However, we have to, and
we need to.
In your day-to-day job.
Exactly, and because there are companies that are utilising it, so it is possible. So it will just become those companies that will probably struggle commercially.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, well. That's it for my questions, Vicky. So thank you so much for sharing some really interesting stories of your career, which I know that a lot of people will be able to relate to, especially on the journey they're going through as a trainee and the challenges they may face. If anyone wants to reach out to you, are you happy for them to contact you?
Yeah, certainly do. I am on LinkedIn, so Vicky Baulch. So yes, drop me an inbox if you've got any questions or need any sort of consulting support. Yes, I'd love or just have questions. I love debate. So
brilliant, Vicky. All right, excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for being a guest on the QP Diaries podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dal. Thank you.
You're welcome. Speak soon.
A huge thank you to our special guest and to our listeners for tuning into the QP Diaries podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the show. As the founder of AssureBio, we created the podcast to support our wider quality assurance community, which aligns to our dedicated offering as a recruitment agency to the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry across the UK. We have over 10 years of experience exclusively focused on recruiting senior quality assurance leaders and QPs. If you want to learn more about AssureBio's recruitment services, or if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, then please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.